Hello, BookTube. I got the latest Entertainment Weekly with its unintentionally horrifying cover. uh, the blurb for the cover is inside the ambitious attempt to bring a former pop culture punchline to the big screen. And shell, yeah, it looks good. It most certainly does not. It is going to. I would say it comes out, I think, at Christmas time, and it's going to. I would say it's going to flop, but considering the subject matter, maybe belly flop would be better. And I was reading the article. I hate to say it, but I hate to say it for one specific reason that I won't get into the details of. Although I can sincerely hope. I feel certain that Jason Momoa, the star of the show, will land on his feet. He's infinitely likable to cast, to crew, to directors especially. I feel certain he won't lack for work. But there was one, I was glancing through the article connected with it's all just studio written PR. And I got to a line that had to have been handed to the author of this article straight from somebody at either DC Comics, the publisher of Aquaman, or the studio that's running the movie. It says here, Aquaman was destined to hit the big screen. Introduced in 1941 as an oceanic superhero battling Nazi U-boat officers, Arthur Curry, that's Aquaman, is one of only a handful of DC Golden Age characters to maintain a continual presence in print. The others are Superman, Batman, Robin, and Wonder Woman. That isn't true. Aquaman has gone long stretches without having a title of his own, which is what I mean by in print. Any kid can draw Aquaman on the sidewalk. What you mean is, did he have a comic of his own? So Robin doesn't belong on that list, and neither does Wonder Woman, and neither does Superman, whose own title has been taken out of regular monthly publication at least twice that I know of, in order for it to be totally revamped and retooled. But anyway, I thought we'd skip back the impending car wreck of Aquaman and move straight all the way to the back, past the moving boxes, onto the loading dock, under the cobwebs, to the book section at the back, which is run by David Canfield and Leah Greenblatt. And it looks like this time it's edited by Kevin Sullivan. And what they do is they have a big book review at the beginning, and then some recommendations, and then a feature after that. So the big book review this time around is Rebecca Mackay's The Great Believers, which is a big, ambitious novel that I read, and it left me cold. I thought it was poorly constructed and it had no internal cohesion whatsoever, so that it was just flashes here and there. Some of the flashes were effective, but that's if I want intermittently effective flashes, I'll stand up quickly and wait for the blood to rush to my head. I don't go to novels for that. But David Canfield reviews it, gives it a nice long review, which is going to be great for the book, because people are going to read this and want to read the book. It's an AIDS novel. The AIDS epidemic has hit Boys Town, the Chicago queer community kept on the city's fringes and left to party, love, and mourn in the few sacred spaces they can call their own. The novel consists of just a few blocks off Lake Michigan's coast, but the neighborhood consists of just a few blocks, but the novel, generous and rich as it is, can hardly be confined to a half-mile radius. It's expansive, a vast landscape of characters and relationships, tragedies and triumphs, steeped in the long shadow of trauma. And he gives it an A-, which I read the review. This is as far as I got in the issue. I read the review and I saw that grade, and I just don't see an A- in this. It's got to be. The only explanation I can come up with is that David Canfield, despite being a book reviewer and for Entertainment Weekly, has not read much in the way of gay fiction, or especially AIDS fiction. I can't think of any other reason why he would read it, unless he thought the relationship part of it was so effectively done that it deserved an A-. But well, anyway, it takes all types. But I thought we'd go through the rest of it together. I haven't examined any of the rest of this here. So there's a sidebar to this article. Okay, there's a sidebar called 3 Searing Novels About the AIDS Crisis. These books don't just mourn the dead, they celebrate their lives. Oh, great. Okay, the first one is The Gifts of the Body by Rebecca Brown, which was really good. Also, like The Great Believers, mostly great in flashes, rather than as a cohesive whole. Once he writes about that. A healthcare worker tends to dying victims in Brown's harrowing, underrated book. Okay, well, I agree that it's underrated. You never hear anybody talk about it. Then the next of the 3 books is The Line of Beauty by Alan Hollinghurst. Hollinghurst won the Man Booker for this stunning story of a gay graduate student. Okay. And the third one is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. The hit bestseller follows 4 queer friends over decades of joy and struggle in New York. Okay. Alright, there's a rather conspicuous problem with this sidebar, don't you think? 3 more searing novels about the AIDS crisis. The Line of Beauty has been fairly well treated on BookTube. Any of you remember it being a novel of the AIDS crisis? How about A Little Life? Is that the first way you describe it? The Gifts of the Body came out in 1994, The Line of Beauty came out in 2004, and The Little Life came out in 2015. You know, it's a sidebar like this that makes me reflect again on the tragedy of the fact that the AIDS epidemic swept through America too soon for written language or book publishing. If only people had been able to write books during the AIDS epidemic, they would have made it onto this sidebar, but no. No, it's prehistory. If only there were books that had been written during the AIDS epidemic. Oh, how valuable they would be. Let's see what the feature is and just forget that little bit right there. Oh no. Okay. The feature is a complete Father's Day book buying guide. Oh my. It's his special Sunday. Oh, Sunday is Father's Day. So what should you get the man who made you? If you truly love him, pass on the coffee mugs and overpriced brunches and give him a gift of a great book, one he'll actually want to read. And that's Leah Greenblatt writing that line, and she's absolutely right. If you need recommendations, we're a little bit late on the clock for you to get them from me, but I'd be happy to field emergency recommendations if you want. Father's Day when I worked in a retail bookstore, Father's Day used to be one of the most active times of the year for my customers and also people who were directed to me by my staff members, coming to me and just lining up for recommendations. Or I would take them aside, to a window or whatever, and I would say, okay, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Tell me some things. Tell me as much as you can, and then I'll make an informed recommendation. Father's Day some years almost approached Christmas. Just for that one afternoon, though the afternoon beforehand, in the sheer volume of recommendations that I made. Of course, Christmas, it was all day long, every day. Or like days on end. So what have we got here? What are the chances they'll recommend anything good? Let's see. Okay, so we're breaking dads up into categories, and the first category is Adventure Dad. And for Adventure Dad, the magazine is recommending The Last Cowboys by John Branch, which is about a Utah family of cowboys and bronco busters, and it's really, really, really good. So wonderful. We're doing fine out of the gate. That's great. And also, they also recommend Lawrence Wright's God Save Texas. That's also wonderful. Not sure that I agree with the rather unhealthy equation of Texas and the West and cowboys and bronco busting with dads and therefore masculinity, but they're 2 great books, so I'm not going to complain too much. Okay, and the next one is Mark Adams' book, Tip of the Iceberg, in which he travels around Alaska. I don't think we ever saw it on this channel. I got a copy. It's really, really good. This Adventure Dad's making out like a bandit here. And then the last one is by Andrew Hogan and Douglas Century, and it's Hunting El Chapo. About the hunting on the U.S.-Mexican border. But they also recommend Into the Raging Sea, Rachel Slade's book about the sinking of the El Faro. Which was really vivid. I think I reviewed it. I think I reviewed 2 out of the 3 Alfaro books that are out this season, all documenting the loss with all hands of a shipping vessel that whose captain steered it into a hurricane instead of away from a hurricane and got predictable results. And then the next one is Geopolitical Dad. And what do they offer here? Ronan Farrow's book War on Peace, about the decline of American diplomacy and the rise of whatever you want to call what's taking its place, which is it won him the Pulitzer Prize, that and his reporting on Harvey Weinstein. And it's harrowingly prescient. You read this thing and you think, okay, I'm reading Silent Spring. I'm reading a book that is defining more accurately a future than it is a present. And that's scary. I hope that doesn't happen. It's a good choice, and it's also thin. Because I'm assuming that Adventure Dad and Geopolitical Dad and all these other dads have one thing in common, which is that they don't read. So you want a thin book. Then Hans Rosling's book Factfulness, 10 Reasons Why We're Wrong About the World and Why Things Are Better Than You Think. I only read the introduction. And at the end of the introduction to the book, came to the conclusion that the author was, to use old-fashioned language, a darn fool. So I wasn't willing to read any more of what he had to say. And then the last one is The Restless Wave, Good Times, Just Causes, Great Fights, and Other Appreciations, which is by John McCain. And I don't know. I'm in a rotten position with John McCain of wanting to side with him just because of the grotesque abuse that the sitting president has heaped on him in every conceivable way. You see a public figure who's been, in service to the country for his whole life, since he was a teenager, and you see him being treated that way, you automatically side with him. But John McCain, the lawmaker, the vote caster, the political entity, I don't side with at all. A craven opportunist, and also the man who made Donald Trump possible by elevating Sarah Palin to national politics. Totally of his own choice, totally at his own command. He introduced a cartoon character into American politics and realized by doing that there was a very fervent substrata of the base that would respond to that. That he realized when he did that there was a huge chunk of Republicans who would not immediately say, she's a failed governor of a rural state, and when you listen to her talk, it's obvious that she's a nut job. So what are you doing, putting her in national politics as the person who'd take over from you if you die in office? That was inexcusable. And that move showed not only John McCain, who I think he probably had praiseworthy reasons to do it. It was just hideously irresponsible. But it also showed the Republican machine that there weren't any limits to a certain faction of the base, that you could get away with candidates on the national stage that you hadn't thought you could do before. And look what we've seen them do since. They have taken that lesson to heart. And in the years since Sarah Palin became a vice presidential nomination, the Republican national machine has swung its weight and its money and its endorsement behind people who ought to be in a doorless prison. So they were actual menaces to society, much less disgraces in the Senate if they ever got there. So I don't know. I haven't read McCain's book. I don't think I will. But I don't know. Maybe if you give it to who was it again? Geopolitical Dad. You might want to give it to him with an artisanal bag of grains of salt, so he doesn't swallow it wholesale. Or read the book certainly, but check the record of the man. I dread the onslaught of saccharine prose in the periodicals that we're going to get when John McCain dies. We'll get some tightly organized, clear-eyed appreciations of the good things that he did, which is exactly the kind of encomium that he himself would want. But we'll get some awful stuff too. I don't even want to think about it. And I especially don't want to hear platitudes from this president you either have one opinion of someone or you have another opinion of someone. If that opinion changes just because they're dead. Well, anyway, the next category is rock dad. Oh my. Oh my. So this is all about rock and roll. The first one is Major Dudes. It's a companion to Steely Dan. I read a bit of it at the Christian Science Monitor and found no traction, as they say. The next one is Astral Weeks, which is sort of a hippie biography of 1968. And then they're also recommending Robert Hilburn's biography of Paul Simon, which I thought was really good. And the last one is Twilight of the Gods, a journey to the end of classic rock, which I didn't even look at. I saw it, I handled it, but I didn't even look at it. And then the next one is Pop Culture Dad. God help us. So I guess we're back in 1968, because that's about dads are usually about 2 full decades behind pop culture. And the ones who aren't, the ones who are as completely current as their 12-year-old kids, are even more insufferable than the ones who are. I don't know if there's a way out for Pop Culture Dad. So what are they doing? Oh God. Oh God. All right, the first one's a perfect example. The Last Interview, which is all about the final interviews of famous people, and the selling point is the final interview with David Foster Wallace. But it's they're individual slim books. I reviewed the one they did for Christopher Hitchens. It was not a stellar performance as a book. The Last Interview, they do James Baldwin. There's an insufferable volume on Kurt Vonnegut. So they don't recommend any specific one here. Just the series in general. I don't know why you would recommend that as opposed to, for instance, a piece of writing by the people, unless you're assuming that Pop Culture Dad has already read every word that David Foster Wallace has ever written. I don't believe that. I haven't talked to Pop Culture Dad lately, but I'm guessing he falls asleep in the middle of the newspaper. What else are they doing? Oh, okay. The next one is that big fat biography of Robin Williams that I think some of you might have seen in the book press or in bookstores. It is very good. I liked it. I got the impression, same with the Paul Simon biography, that it's not the final word. I got the impression that a better biography could be written of the same subject. And since Paul Simon's still alive, Robin Williams, everyone who knew him is still alive, there's ample chance for, I guess the depth of the insight in both books was the thing I was looking for that just didn't seem. It seemed like a better job could have been done. I mean, the Robin Williams book is very good. It's very interesting, very affecting, of course. But I think perhaps it will leave Pop Culture Dad a little restless. And what is the last one? Oh, okay. There's a little nothing book about the movie Caddyshack, the making of a Hollywood classic. It's a nothing book because the interviews with directors and producers and cast and whatnot aren't anything like what they would be if these people were diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. It's a very kind, gentle, glowing book. So if you want that, but I always think if you're going to invest the time in reading 170 pages about a movie, it shouldn't be. Well, I guess I just don't like hagiography in anything, whether it's biographies or movie accounts or anything else. I don't like it at all. I prefer to hear the whole unvarnished story of Caddyshack, and this book is not that. So again, Pop Culture Dad might be getting the short end of the stick. And then the last category is Literary Dad. Do any of you actually have a literary dad? That would be very nice. So what have we got here? Oh God. Okay, Literary Dad gets a hockey puck to the teeth first thing with Spring by Karl Ove Knausgaard. It's awful, just as awful as everything else the man has ever written. So people who have Literary Dad might want to skip that one. I hope the other recommendations are any better. They might all be bad. Oh no, the next one is Joe Nesbo's Macbeth. His entry in the Hogarth Shakespeare series. He adapts the Shakespeare's tragedy of Macbeth to a modern-day police procedural. I thought it was terrific, just terrific, from the very first page. So that's good. Oh, and the next one is Charles Fraser's Verena. I think we saw an advanced copy of Verena on this channel. It's Charles Fraser's historical novel about the wife of the Confederate President Davis. And I went into it wary, just completely wary, because Fraser has a penchant for saccharine and also for poorly developed drama scenes. He's very good with non-dramatic scenes, characters just standing at a fence post talking or whatnot. But when he needs to write a scene in which something really tense happens, he tends to flub it. I think he's probably an overthinker. But Verena had none of that. Verena was wonderful. I was really surprised. Clearly, easily my favorite thing that this author has written. So that's good. And the same thing with the next one. Michael Ondaatje's Warlight. I have found in reading him that Michael Ondaatje is almost always unbearable. Just an unbearably fuzzy, unfocused, maundering, wool-gathering, navel-gazing author. But Warlight is a tightly constructed novel. I won't go all flat Earth conspiracy theory on you, but it honestly did feel to me, for long stretches, like it was written by someone else. But either way, I highly recommend it. Again, I don't think we saw it on this channel. Okay, and then the last one for Literary Dad is Stephen King. I would ordinarily object. I would say if you're recommending books for Literary Dad, Stephen King doesn't belong on the list, but they're recommending his latest book, which is this thing, The Outsider, which I actually liked. I thought it was well constructed, and even it had a fair number of effective scenes. It had the usual faults of a Stephen King novel, in most especially egregious self-indulgence. Egregious. The type of thing that you would only do if you were sure that just about 10 minutes after you died, they were going to start the jackhammers on putting your face up on Mount Rushmore. It's just the idea, the self-indulgence that comes from someone who thinks they're not only well-known, but totally great. And that drives me crazy, because the impression I get in interviews is that King doesn't have that opinion of himself. So I don't know why he writes that way. If it's fan service, he ought to knock it off. Because if The Outsider is any indication of what he could do if he toned it down, imagine what he could do if he knocked it off. Bore down completely and wrote a book that would pass muster if he took his name off it and sent it to a literary editor at a major house. He ought to try that. He's certainly prolific enough to generate a 150-page manuscript and send it totally blind to the reading intern or the reading editor of a major publishing house and see what happens. Maybe pull some strings to make sure it got marked up, or submit it, well, one way or another. The Outsider, I thought, was quite effective. One of the most effective Stephen King books I've read in a long, long time. So I don't mind if Literary Dad puts it on his nightstand. So there you have it. That is the literary footprint, as it were, of the new Entertainment Weekly with the watery Aquaman cover. There's our boy, right in the middle there. And there are all sorts of ways to do an Aquaman movie. I have a feeling this movie is not going to do any of them. I have a feeling instead it's going to be leaden and pretentious, and I'd be willing to bet that the only humor in it will be humor that Jason Momoa sneaks in himself. Because it's impossible to spend 10 minutes with him without him laughing and without him getting you to laugh. And so him playing a super serious, basically underwater Conan the Barbarian might not work any better than when he played Conan the Barbarian. We shall see. We shall see. I will not, of course, go to see it in the theater, but I'm confident I will get a screener. In fact, I'll probably get a screener soon that just doesn't have the green screen stuff, which is fine by me. So that's it. That is our pop culture dose of Entertainment Weekly. So now you know what everyone in the country is reading about for books when they're not reading every single little individual word of the New York Review of Books the way they should be. So I'm gonna wrap this up for now. But I'll be back. I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.